Well, I'm editor of the Wayne Madsendan, former U.S. naval officer. I've worked in the past for the National Security Agency. Well, obviously, if the CIA is involved in any sort of... The one thing that's very evident right now is that when we say CIA, there are a number of CIAs. Not everyone in the CIA supports the current director, John Brennan, who's very close to Barack Obama. So when we say CIA, there's different factions within the CIA. Now, the faction that supported the coup, which may or may not have included Mr. Brennan, were concerned about Turkey's moving away from the European Union membership arrangements and adopting an independent foreign policy. Well, I think there's very little chance that Fethullah Gulen will be extradited. He became a legal resident of the United States in 1999, and it's noteworthy who his three sponsors were for that permanent residency. There were three named on his documentation. Graham Fuller, who is the retired chief of CIA activities, especially in the Muslim world. He was a close confidant of CIA Director William Casey during the Reagan administration. He's also the former father-in-law of Ruslan Tsarnaev, the uncle of the two Boston Marathon bombers, Tamerlan and Johar Tsarnaev. So the other two who helped sponsor Fethullah Gulen were ex-CIA officer George Fetus and former U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Morton Abramovitz. So these are very high-powered individuals who supported Fethullah Gulen. I would also note that Gulen, living in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, has the support of the two Pennsylvania senators, Democratic Senator Bob Casey and the Republican Senator Toomey. Well, I think it's when we look at some of the things Gulen has done for the CIA in the past, at least a portion of the CIA and people within the Obama administration, especially within the Department of Defense, recognize the fact that he provided certain, shall we say, services to the U.S. in the past. In the 1990s, for example, Gulen's network was very instrumental in providing assistance for the rebels in Chechnya and in Kosovo and Bosnia. These favors are never forgotten by the CIA. Yeah, well, this is an issue with NATO. I mean, NATO is viewed as a defensive organization, but we've seen NATO used over the years to carry out a lot of subversive activities within NATO countries. The entire Gladio operation, which was first brought to light by former Turkish Prime Minister Bülent Ecevit. He's the one who said he saw documents about this NATO subversive network, which he knew as Gladio, and he said it was as active in Turkey as it was in Italy. We know that Gladio in Italy, for example, was used to help assassinate former Prime Minister Aldo Moro, and it was used to conduct all kinds of false flag terrorist operations in West Germany and Belgium and in northern Italy and in other countries. So, yeah, NATO, just because they claim they're a defensive organization doesn't mean that they don't have a clandestine and offensive branch that carries out operations within NATO countries themselves. Well, obviously, if the CIA is involved in any sort of coup operation, they're going to have ground agents, field agents in place to deal as liaison with local officials. We've seen this in many, many cases in previous coups in Chile in 1973 involving the CIA station in Santiago. We saw it in 2009 when Obama and Mrs. Clinton fomented their first coup against the elected president of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya. That involved not only CIA personnel at the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa, but also U.S. military personnel stationed at a U.S. air base in the country. This is kind of normal procedure for the CIA to have people in country, in place to support the operation. Well, I think when we have to look at John Brennan, who is a very unusual CIA director. Of course, he has the ear of President Obama. Brennan is very, very close to the Saudi government. He's the former CIA station chief in Riyadh. He actually made a visit when he was the CIA station chief to Mecca, which is reserved for only observant Muslims and also special guests of the Saudi king, who is the protector of the cities of Mecca and Medina. So it shows that Brennan has a very, very close relationship with Saudi Arabia. He also has been at the forefront of providing jihadist rebels in Syria with CIA weapons, money, logistics. So with Brennan still there, and Brennan, it's known that Brennan wants to keep his job if Mrs. Clinton is elected president. So we may see Brennan for some time in the future. Now, so this of course, this relationship between Brennan and the Saudis, and perhaps his fractured relationship now with Turkey, also involves other players in the area. Assad's government in Syria, the Kurdish government in northern Iraq, and of course Russia, which the U.S. now is threatening to carry out terrorist attacks against Russia itself using jihadists from Syria, Iraq, and other countries if Russia doesn't pull its troops out of Syria and stop its campaign against the rebels.
Former USA Ambassador of Ankara, James Jeffrey, he made an explanation too, and he says Erdogan and Turkish government didn't listen Washington, and he said that America doesn't want Erdogan, so it happens some conflict in Turkey, in Istanbul, in here. So what is your opinions? Do you agree with James Jeffrey? Erdogan didn't listen Washington, and he said America doesn't want Erdogan.
Yeah, well, I think he's correct, because look, let's look back at what happened in 1997. It's well known that the United States supported what's called the soft coup against the Erbakan government that year because the U.S. felt that it was too Islamist in its orientation. So we saw a soft coup in 1997, and we saw basically a hard coup attempt just a few months ago. Well, if we look at especially what this one individual who's very influential in the Obama administration, George Soros. George Soros has billions of dollars which he spreads around to various groups. He calls it. He says it's for the advancement of civil society, but in many cases this money goes to political opposition groups and even secessionist forces. So it wouldn't be a surprise if some of this Soros money, as we know, Soros money goes to the Chechens, it goes to other groups inside Russia who are opposing President Putin, it goes into Western China, Muslim groups that are opposed to the Chinese leadership. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see some of this money actually ending up in the hands of the Kurds. Yeah, well, it all depends on who the winner of the U.S. presidential election is. If it's Hillary Clinton, we're going to see U.S.-Russian relations get much worse than they already are. They're pretty bad right now. But Mrs. Clinton said she's going to establish no-fly zones over Syria, and she said she would not hesitate to shoot down Russian airplanes. Today, the spokesman for John Kerry at the State Department threatened Russia with terrorist activity from jihadist sources, which apparently the State Department claims it has some influence over. So under a Clinton administration, I think we could actually see the outbreak of war between the U.S. and Russia. The U.S., of course, would expect help from its NATO allies, but I think there's a number of NATO allies, including Turkey and Greece and the Czech Republic and Slovakia and others that would be very, very hesitant to go to war with Russia on behalf of Mrs. Clinton. And now, if Trump were to win, I think we go back to détente, close U.S.-Russian relations, and we certainly wouldn't see any sort of potential conflict, which anything between the U.S. and Russia could easily develop into a nuclear exchange. So it's very, very serious. Yeah, well, remember what I said about it's not one CIA, it's not even one U.S. government here. We have, in the case of the support for the Syrian Kurds, that's coming from U.S. Special Forces operating in northern Syria. On the other hand, the CIA has been opposed to giving any weapons to the Syrian Kurds because it's basically the CIA is representing the interests of Saudi Arabia. This is John Brennan and the Emirates, and so the CIA has been supporting many of these rebel groups, which are composed of many jihadist forces that have been trained and provided support by the Saudis. So there have been cases, I'm told, from within the Pentagon where U.S. Special Forces troops have actually engaged rebel forces. They've been on both sides of the conflict. U.S. Special Forces helping the Syrian Kurds have engaged CIA personnel providing assistance to the jihadists in Syria. whether we've got U.S. personnel shooting and killing one another, that I don't know. But certainly, they have U.S. forces have been on both sides. Well, I think everyone should recognize that not all U.S. ambassadors are diplomats. We've seen in many cases the U.S. ambassador is also either the head of the CIA station in a country, or at least working with the CIA station in a certain country. And that's been the case ever since the CIA was formed in 1947. So it may be that the U.S. ambassador to Turkey answers to more than just Secretary of State John Kerry. He may also be answering to some folks over at the CIA in Virginia. Well, obviously the CIA doesn't like failures, but they've had many. In many cases, the Iranian Revolution was a big surprise to the CIA when it occurred, and so this will be chalked up by the CIA as a failure. But again, just because they fail doesn't mean they're not going to try again. Maybe not as overtly. That may be more of a covert nature next time. Well, I mean, it's obvious that, for one thing, when something like that fails, everybody will, it's called plausible deniability. Everybody's denying they had any foreknowledge or role in it. And of course, the U.S. and Britain has other ways to punish a country, and we've seen that many occasions through economic pressure because of the influence of the City of London and Wall Street on international economics and finance. I personally do not think that the U.S. will extradite Mr. Gulen. He has too many friends within the CIA. He has too many political friends, not only in Pennsylvania, but in other states in both the Republican and Democratic parties. And I think he will remain where he is. Now, a lot, of course, depends on the next administration. But I don't think that either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump would be interested in extraditing Mr. Gulen. Yeah, well, let's look at Mrs. Clinton has received endorsements from many CIA personnel, including many former directors. Mr. Trump, on the other hand, is running on a platform that's, he doesn't want to see any more immigration, especially from Muslim countries, into the United States, and he, of course, sees Turkey as a gateway nation for that. So either one of these people, Trump or Mrs. Clinton, is going to be all that disposed to answering any extradition requests from the Turkish government. As far as the Incirlik base, wherever you find a U.S. military base, as I mentioned, the 2009 coup in Honduras would not have been successful had it not been for U.S. military personnel stationed at the U.S. Air Base in Palmarola in Honduras, just outside the capital of Tegucigalpa. So this is pretty standard that the U.S. bases in a country, if they exist, will be used to support a coup activity, a coup operation.